Napoli have just won the scudetto, but let me explain to you just how outrageous that achievement actually is. For those of you that don't watch much Seria A, the last thing you might have heard from Napoli is them winning their first title in 30 years, just 2 years ago. So on the face of things, it's probably not that outrageous for them to skip a year and then to win it the year after, right? Well, not exactly. Because after that season, their manager Spalletti actually left. He left as a hero in Naples and went on to manage the Italian national team. And after that, it's fair to say things didn't really go to plan. Despite the fact that the majority of the 2023 title-winning side actually stayed in Naples, the only noticeable departure was really Kim Min-jae. He went to Bayern for a fair price of 50 million euros, so not much to complain about, especially because they spent that money on Lindstrom and Raspadori anyway. Rudy Garcia was initially brought in as Spalletti's replacement, but he only lasted till November because they were 4th in the Seria A. Walter Mazzari took over from him but didn't have much of an impact either. Well, at least no positive impacts because he only ended up winning 6 of the last 17 games, leaving them in 9th position and on the verge of a Champions League exit. Then in February, Francesco Calzona was appointed as manager, a previous assistant to both Spalletti and Sarri. He took charge just before a massive Champions League clash against Barcelona in the round of 16, but they ended up losing 4-2 on aggregate. He was left in charge until the end of the season, but they could only finish 10th. In fact, after that Champions League game against Barcelona, they only got one more win all season. So yeah, obviously 10th is nowhere near good enough for the defending champions and something needed to change. But it wasn't all bad news for Napoli because they still had some massive talents. I'm thinking of talents like Victor Osimhen, who got 15 goals in that season. But then if you look back to the season before, he had 26 goals. Or Kvaratskhelia, who was voted the best player in the Serie A the year before. So really, they just needed another top manager. And step forward, Antonio Conte, who is probably one of the most underrated managers in football. And he has plenty of experience of winning in Italy. Across his time at Juventus and Inter, he won 4 league titles. He's also won the Supercoppa Italiana twice, and he's had success outside of Italy, like in the Premier League when he took over Chelsea and won then the league. But the season before that, they finished 10th. So, to be honest, looking back at it, he was the perfect choice. But it wasn't all sunshine and roses because just as he arrives, his star striker decides he's unhappy at the club and immediately wants to leave. And to make it even worse, for a multitude of reasons, they're not able to sell Victor Osimhen for a massive fee, so he ends up going on loan to Galatasaray. Also, a key player, Zielinski, decided not to renew his contract after 8 years in Naples and went to rivals Inter. Just when it seemed like everything was falling apart, Napoli changed the game and outsmarted everyone. They had money to spend, but rather than going out and spending money on the most in-demand, in-form players, they looked for those underachievers, players that had huge potential but weren't right for their club or just weren't performing well. Like Romelu Lukaku, desperately not wanted by Chelsea and not really wanted by many other clubs due to his high price tag, inconsistencies and plenty of other reasons, but when you look at it, a perfect club like Napoli just works for him. He's got plenty of experience playing in Italy, scoring goals. He also has played with Conte before and they had a great relationship. And finally, he's just a game changer, a game winner. It's exactly what they needed to replace Osimhen. Even the timing of the signing was brilliant because they left Chelsea with no choices. They left it so late in the window, so they had to accept the Napoli bid. Even players like Billy Gilmour for £14 million is a great bargain with all of his experience in the Premier League and in the national team, and realistically he just wasn't in Hertzler's plans at Brighton. They kept buying new players. He's not going to go out and win games for you, he's just going to be a consistent hard worker in the team, and that was exactly what was needed. David Neres had huge potential when he arrived at Benfica, but it wasn't really clicking for him due to a lack of minutes from players like Di Maria and Rafa getting more minutes. But ultimately, a punt on him for £28 million sounds like a good deal as well. Alessandro Bongiorno had been playing fantastic for Torino. They went out and spent €35 million on him. A great signing, but ultimately Torino isn't really the place that champions go and get their star players from. Also, bringing players in on loan for next to no money just so they have players for 20-15 minutes at the end of the game. I'm thinking of players like Philip Billing or Noah Okafor. At left back, they got Spinazzola from Roma on a free transfer. Now, he wasn't wanted in Rome anymore, but he had always had huge potential. He had huge potential that he showed at the Euros, being linked with teams like Man United. All of a sudden, 2 massive injuries derailed his career. But that didn't stop Napoli. Napoli took a chance on him, and he's starting pretty much every game for them this season. And of course, if you're mentioning the ridiculous pieces of business that Napoli done at the start of the season, you can't not mention Scott McTominay. He had been misused by Man United for so many years. Yes, he'd pop up with moments of quality now and again, but he wasn't wanted there. He really wasn't shining. But I think he showed for Scotland exactly what he can do and what a massive player he could be for any club, especially if you played him as a centre attacking mid. At the start of the season, if you're expecting Napoli to all click together perfectly, you would be completely wrong, because they lost their first game 3-0 to Hellas Verona, who are a team fighting relegation basically every single year. But after that, things did pick up for Napoli. They started winning games. They were really strong defensively. They started to click more as a team. Until December, where their star player Kvaratskhelia got injured and wouldn't return till mid-January. At the turn of the year, they were in first place, but it didn't seem likely to stick it out, with Atalanta being on equal points and Inter being only 2 points behind them. When you are being chased down by the defending champions Inter Milan, the last thing you want is what happened next. Their star player, in the middle of an intense title race, decided he wanted to leave the club. Despite huge attempts from Napoli to get him to sign a new contract on higher wages, he wasn't having any of it, and Kvaratskhelia ended up going to PSG for 70 million euros. And I think at this point, it's fair to say that most thought Napoli didn't have the legs to go out and win the scudetto without their star player, especially because in January, they didn't strengthen with massive signings, just some of the loan signings that I spoke about before. But from Conte's perspective, losing their best player wasn't going to drop morale, because they had a few other advantages up their sleeve. Now the first, you can't really call genius, more a series of fortunate events, or maybe unfortunate events, because basically Conte's Napoli was known for its high intensity. Now in the Seria A, they're not the only team known for their high intensity. Inzaghi's Inter is pretty high intensity as well. Whilst teams like Inter Milan were fighting for the Cup, the League and the Champions League, Napoli could just fully focus on the league run. That enabled them to gain this advantage where rest is so key in a high intensity press. And they were able to get it compared to their rivals. Even the likes of Atalanta and Milan had European fixtures. I also don't think you can truly do this video without touching on Napoli's fans. They are some of the most hardcore, passionate, loving fans in the world. So when you have that on your side, at home or away, it's obviously going to be a huge advantage. When you combine Napoli's crazy fans mixed with Conte's incredible tactics, and those small advantages like no European football, you can see how a team of not really world-class players, a lot of players that were left out in the cold at previous clubs, came in and just did this incredible job that got them to the final day of the season. And to top off this story, they almost didn't get there in front. Because in the penultimate game of the season, Napoli took on a relegation fighting Parma team, whilst Inter played a Champions League challenging Lazio side. And whilst Inter took an early lead, Napoli really struggled to break down Parma. But that was all forgotten about because the ex-Chelsea player Pedro scored for Lazio, making the score 1-1, meaning both of them get a point, meaning Napoli go into the final day as massive favourites. Until Inter took the lead with 7 minutes to go, 2-1, putting them in pole position for the final game. But these games were far from over. Napoli continued to put immense pressure on Parma. In the last 10 minutes, they hit the woodwork 3 times before not 1, but 2 penalties were given. 1 in either game. 1 to Napoli and 1 to Lazio. The perfect outcome. Lazio score. Pedro scores again. 2-2. Napoli have it in hand, but Napoli can win the league there and then, and the penalty is overturned for a foul in the build-up. In the Napoli game, it finishes 0-0. They are unable to break down Parma, and Inter have the chance to have it in their own destiny on the final day, and the misses they had, in particular Arnautovic, with one of the worst misses ever, finishing 2-2. So at the end of the day, Napoli have it in their own hands and they just need to win on the final day of the season. All Napoli need to do is win at the Maradona Stadium at home against Calgary. Is it any surprise who opens the scoring for them? With an overhead kick, Scott McTominay shows why he was the best player in Italy this season, the MVP of the league. Napoli lift it all. The most ridiculous achievement from 10th in the league with some of the brilliantest transfers, and there's still one more twist. As I'm recording this, apparently Antonio Conte is actually leaving Napoli. So exactly like they did with Spalletti, their manager has left immediately after winning them the league. Looks like Allegri could come in, it's too early to say, but that is the most ridiculous story. If you enjoyed this, check out 2 more ridiculous stories from Inzaghi or Mourinho.